Hello, everyone. It's midday on Friday, which can mean one thing and one thing only. It's time for Wow Ergonomics. Now, as you can see, I have not got Stephen with me again today. He's out and about gallivanting, but don't worry, because I have some special guests. Please welcome Beatrice and Toby. Hello, folks.
Hello.
Welcome to Wow Ergonomics. How are you both?
Awesome, as usual.
As usual. You never have a bad day, Beatrice. Every day is a good day.
There's the burnout days. It's like, but there's still, you got to be awesome through it.
Yeah, badass even, as your profile tells everybody. And Toby, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. It's Friday, so looking forward to the weekend. Always good.
Right, now tell everybody, this is what we always start with. Tell everybody a little bit about where you come from, what it is that you do, and then we'll go from there. Toby, we'll start with you. Where are you coming from, sir?
As in location?
Yeah, location-wise first.
Sunny Bedfordshire. I say sunny.
Really?
Loosely.
Sunny Bedfordshire. Okay, where about in Bedfordshire? Because I'm a Bedfordshire boy, born and bred.
Sandy, where are you from?
I'm from Wootton, just outside of Bedford.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, small world.
Small world, very small world indeed. Yeah,
where are
there
you
you
now?
go. And I'm in sunny Somerset, which is where I've been for the last, I don't know how many years, having moved down here many years ago to buy a business, believe it or not.
Beautiful part of the country.
Lovely part of the country. Yeah, lovely. And Toby, tell us a little bit about it, what it is that you do.
So I'm a mobility coach. I work with guys in their 40s and 50s. I'm very much trying to break the myths and the fallacies surrounding middle age with these achy, creaky, painful, stiff joints that seem to plague everyone. And these excuses of, I can't do this because I have a sore body part. And I want to add, right now, let's not make excuses for the work that we haven't done. And that's largely what it comes down to. And I just want to say as well, before I forget, because I have forgotten, thank you so much for having me as well, Graham. Delighted and feel very privileged to be here.
Oh, thank you very much. Beatrice, tell us where you're coming from.
Well, currently I'm in Bangkok, Thailand. Although the background is slightly more complicated. I was born in Australia, half Swiss, half Portuguese, and I spent the last 10 years in Myanmar.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
For those people that are wondering about the maths there, that's a lot of halves. So, so how did that work?
So there's only two halves. I was born in Australia. So my father was Swiss and my mother was Portuguese.
Fantastic. Okay, and tell us what it is that you do.
Well, I'm a badass brand strategist, which means I'm getting eyes on your brand while you're sleeping.
While we're sleeping?
While you're sleeping. I mean, you can go to sleep and people are going to come and visit your page, etc., and turn into leads, etc. They'll reach out.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. That's fantastic. So you've got people looking at people's brands while they're asleep. When they wake up in the morning, you can give them a complete brand overview, and if need be, a little bit of a shine and a polish. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Basically, I'm just you make the brand so memorable that people, even if they're not looking at your page anymore, and somebody mentions something, like, say, for example, the kangaroo, people visited my page, Rue, my logo and my sidekick features a lot. And she's talked about a lot, even without me being present there. So it's a similar sort of vibe there.
Well, that's tremendous. A strong brand is really, really important on any social media platform. And here we are broadcasting live to the nation on on various social media platforms now. Now, Toby, I want to start with you, if I may. Obviously, I fit into that category. All right. Actually, I am 51 this year, for anyone that didn't realise. And things do start to ache a little bit when you get to a certain age. But part of that is down to our lifestyle choices, is it not? And for a lot of us, it's something that we talk about a lot on this show. We've now got ourselves working away at computers. There will be a lot of people watching this that will be sitting there at the moment watching this on the computer, who then work on the computer all day long. We don't take breaks. We don't even stop to eat for lunch. We go and get our lunch. Yeah, you see, Beatrice is laughing because she knows she does it. Okay, we eat our lunch at the computer. We if we need the toilet, which we may not do enough because we don't drink enough water. We finally make it to the toilet once or twice a day. We come straight back, get back onto the computer again, and then wonder why, without any exercise at all in our routine, in our daily life or whatever, we start to ache and we can't even get our socks on in the morning. Is this typical, sir?
When we get to our age, yes, we're only a few years apart, Graham. Very, very. And we put it down to being common, but common doesn't mean it's normal. But it's not, doesn't just creep up on us overnight. It's taken years and decades of accumulative, repetitive movement patterns to get us to this point. So there's nothing inherently wrong with sitting. I know that standing desks are in vogue at the moment because we've seen prices go through the roof of these things as a result, because it's a fashionable accessory item now. But there's nothing wrong with sitting. It has been demonized. Rather, we spend a lot of time sitting down. We then spend a huge amount of time driving. We then spend time sat on the sofa in front of the TV, binge watching whatever series you like. We sit at the dining room table. We go out somewhere. We go to the pub and sit down. We have a coffee. We sit down. So it's these similar and repetitive patterns that actually become more of an issue for us, and we lack movement variability. It's not about necessarily exercise, because exercise is just a tiny fraction of our 24-hour day. So if you spend 8 hours sat down, plus everything else that goes either side of that, and then you go and do some sort of exercise for an hour, that's not really going to unwind all of that work. Now, if in fact, you
could injure yourself, in fact.
It may increase that propensity for injury, but it's not just about today or the week, because we all have those times. It's difficult to get away from sitting in the modern life. We can't hide that, but rather, you're 51 this year. It's what you've been doing for the last 3 decades. And all of this
Don't tell people that.
It takes its toll. So if all you do is sit down on a chair and you look at a height of whatever chair that you sit in, under control. But then we sort of drop that last inch, 2 inches onto the chair, and we're sitting very passively because we're not actually supporting our body. I've got this support behind me, so I'm sitting here. I'm not using the musculature to support myself. Okay, so eventually over time, let's fast forward to your 80s, you can no longer under control sit down to that chair. So we need a chair riser to lift that chair even further. So our range of motion, active range of motion, decreases. But then we do something, a trip or a fall, and the joints, whatever joint it is, it's not just about joints and muscles. But what about the ligaments and the tendons? The joint's not used to working through its full range of motion because we've only used it through a partial range. The same with all of the connective tissues as well. But then we say, it's our age, it's normal, it's that arthritic joint. And actually, we know that movement is very good for osteoarthritis. I say we, rather, medicine research, many studies have demonstrated that movement, good movement, is great for osteoarthritis. So let's get out of this, I'm old, it's my age, I'm middle-aged, I can't do this. You can reintegrate movement back into your day. And it's not about hard exercise. You don't have to be an exercise fanatic. And I want to break that. I come from a fanatical background of hard exercise, but that can equally be very damaging and destructive as well. So it's not about the hard stuff. There's some really simple things you can do throughout the day, in your morning or in the evening. And it doesn't matter if you are a complete novice to exercise and you're an absolute hater of anything physical, to even a world-class athlete.
That is brilliant. Thank you, Toby. And we will come back to that in a minute, because you've got some. You've made me think already this morning, which is fantastic. Harris, thanks for joining us. Yes, we will have a good one. I hope you have a great one too. Beatrice, now you were sniggling a little bit when you were listening to that, because the part of you was thinking, yeah, I do that, don't you?
Well, I actually have an interesting story to add on to what you were saying, Toby.
Brilliant.
So living in Southeast Asia for as long as I have, people are way more flexible than us Westerners, and it's because they spend a lot of their time growing up and even older either squatting or they're sitting on the floor cross-legged, and it's just so much healthier. But I try to do it, and I've been here for this long, and no, because I grew up in like the Western style where we're sitting down while we're driving, while we're working, etc. It's being on the floor is no longer that automatic or comfort zone for us. So it's a really interesting story that you pointed out. And people here, it doesn't matter what age they are, they're often so much more flexible. Like I can't even sit down cross-legged with both of my legs completely down on either side. I was like, God.
But it's true. But actually, and you're both raising great and interesting points there. It's something that I've talked about on this show before, and I'd like to get both your opinions on it, which is that one of the reasons we do sit, and yeah, sit-stand desks have actually got cheaper. I'll throw that in. Sit-stand desks have actually got cheaper of late, as opposed to more expensive. When I first started selling sit-stand desks many moons ago, probably about 20-something years ago, I first started selling sit-stand desks. They were about $2,000 to $3,000 for a sit-stand desk. So actually, that technology has got proportionately cheaper over the years. But no, standing to work all day is not the answer, because standing to work is just as bad as sitting to work all day. You know, the problem is that we just don't move. Okay, that is part of the problem. But I think that part of the sitting thing, and it's right. When did we first sit cross-legged? We did it at junior school. Okay, we did it when we were very young. We used to sit on the school floor, cross-legged, sit there for assembly, etc. And that was then the last time that we did it, or we did it when we went to clubs when we were very small. And then we get to a certain age, especially in this country, we get to an age and then we sit on chairs. And now think about this in education as well. We are taught in education that when we are to concentrate on something, we need to sit down, and we need to sit down on a chair, and that's when we can focus, right? Now, my son, who is 7 now, who's waiting for a diagnosis of ADHD, doesn't like to sit down. He likes to traverse around the classroom, twirling and swirling and everything else, and that can prove a problem for teachers, because it means it distracts everybody else. But that's his way of focusing. And actually, everyone's taught to sit down. But that means that we get to psychologically thinking about, if we sit down, we can focus. How many people, when we talk to them, say, actually, if I sit, that's when I can focus on doing this. That's when I can focus on doing that. What we need to learn within that as well is, while I'm sitting down doing this, etc., how do I get out of that routinely so that actually I can really focus on stuff as well? Because here's the other side of that equation. I've also known businesses where they've employed developers for software, etc., whatever, and there was one guy down the road. He actually created a tennis court outside, and he used to send his guys outside to play tennis periodically, however rubbish they were at tennis, just because it helped them to actually overcome some of those problems that they were struggling to think of, sat down, because it actually starts to engage the other part of the brain because we're actively out there. So, Toby, I'd like to hear your comments on what I've just said first.
You're both right. Beatrice, you mentioned about Eastern cultures, squatting, absolutely, sitting cross-legged to socialize, to eat, to defecate, and all sorts, to work, to relax. But in the West, we think of ourselves as more advanced, sit down on a chair. But it kind of ties into Graham. And you get people in their 90s that are still able to do that, Beatrice, as well. I'm sure you see that daily. But we got 20-year-olds in the UK that can't do this. So, Graham, going back to the education, you're right. Kids move. They're just fidget machines. They just don't stop. And then we kind of get them at the table then where they're learning to eat. And it's like, sit still. Sit down, focus. And part of it is a little bit of discipline, but we also think these are the social norms. It's sort of etiquette of eating nicely and properly and all the rest of it. We go to school, sit behind a desk, sit down, sit still, stop fidgeting. But we need movement for that blood flow. We want the blood flow to the brain. We want the oxygen, which can help us to concentrate, and that's been proven. Einstein used to walk to problem solve. Yeah, so if it's good enough for one of the smartest men in history, why is it? I'm not going to say you, Graham, or you, Beatrice, but why is that not good enough for me? So,
actually, to throw into that equation, I've read several of Richard Branson's books, for example, and he talks about walk meetings. He will only have, if it's a new concept, he will only have that meeting if he's walking around.
Yeah, and walking meetings are awesome. But even from this very young age, it's kind of, we drill it into our children. Sit still, sit down, focus. You've got to be still. And is that about attention, or is that about discipline and control? Now, that's going down another rabbit hole with the education system, and that's not my remit. And kids can counter that, because as soon as you get them out of the chair, playground, break time, they're running, jumping, crawling, fighting, whatever they're doing, and they just don't stop in other parts of their life as well. But then we get older and we do less, and sort of 17, you might learn to drive. So you no longer walk to your mates or go down the pub, you start driving. We're less likely to do as much, and we're similar sort of age, Graham, so very common for many of us in this age bracket to have walked miles and miles to school 12 months of the year, come rain or shine. Now kids are driven 100 meters to school. And I understand lives are busier these days and more involved, but we haven't got as much movement variability. And again, driving to school, you're sat in that sitting position again. So, but I do want to add, there's nothing inherently wrong with sitting. Rather, it is the similar movement patterns, because you could have somebody working in a factory at a lathe doing the same repetitive motion day in, day out, week after week, year after year, decade after decade, and they can have challenges, yet they've been on their feet. So it's these similar patterns, similar movements.
Well, Andrew's actually asking that question: is sitting the issue, or sitting with poor posture?
There is posture is another thing. Posture, I think, has when we look at the history of posture, it's been more about aesthetics. I.e., if we look at ballet and dance, it's about what looks attractive and what looks nice and good. If we look at the military, and let's include the police with this as well, it's about giving this level of confidence and lots of other aspects as well. Posture is dynamic, it's not static. Yes. So whether you slouch at a desk or you're sat upright, your head is jutted forward, doesn't really matter. Posture is dynamic, rather it's the lack of variability. So sat in a chair, it doesn't matter if I sit, I could do half kneeling. I could do tall kneeling. I could sit on the floor cross-legged with my legs in a straddle position. In a 90-90 position, I could then drop to a squat, half kneeling. The armed forces, the full squat used to be a shooting position. I don't believe it is these days because many young men are no longer capable of sitting comfortably in a full squat to shoot straight.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, interesting. Yeah. It's certainly, there's elements which, you know, weight loading on various parts of the body changes depending on the posture that's held. And therefore, you know, certainly within ergonomics, one of the things that's looked at is those kind of weight loadings and more negative postures, if you like, because that you're actually holding those postures for long periods of time without the movement, with perhaps negative weight bearing on certain parts of the body. Yeah.
But let's flip the coin and come to the other side. If we look at the armed forces, if you're out on the parade ground for 2, 3, 4 hours, standing to attention, standing up straight, head up, shoulders back, you go and speak to those guys. Are they feeling really comfortable doing that?
No, they feel really bad. Yeah.
There you are. So is standing up straight, is sitting up straight good for you? Well, I'm not saying it's bad, but again, it's the similar and repetitive movements.
And this is where things are misunderstood. And again, we've talked about this on this program before. You know, for years, do you remember there used to be these posters in offices, and it showed like people sitting at right angles? It's like, you know, correct sitting position. You know,
yes.
No, it's not a correct sitting position. It's because that was a misinterpretation. It was actually taken from HSE guidance, which was a reference posture for measuring you to the equipment that you're using at a desk to see whether there was a fit between you and the equipment. Yeah. In other words, was the desk at the right sort of height for you? Did you have your feet? You know, could you actually put your feet on the ground if you wanted to, so that you could actually change your posture, etc. It was a reference posture rather than this was a position that you're meant to sit in all day. And I used to go and see people and they went, but I've sat like that all day long and I've still got a bad back. You go, yeah, because you've sat like that all day long. Yeah.
It's amazing. And so it becomes easy to blame poor posture, but what's the poor posture from? It's just simply you have that lack of movement variability again. And I know that sounds so simple, and in principle it is, but our lives make that even more complicated. And even down to, we have shoulders. The shoulder is the most mobile joint in the body, but we get to our age, Graham, how many men can legitimately get their arm and shoulder into full flexion without input from other parts of the body? Now, I can't see your rib cage and your lower back, but we typically, in order to do that, compensate by lifting our lower ribs here and arching from the thoracic lumbar junction. Okay, very typical, but we're unaware of that. So our shoulder isn't functioning as a shoulder. We use other parts of our body as a result. And then we play a racket game, you know, high velocity, high power. We reach something out the cupboard up above and go, oh, hurt my back. I've got a bad back. No, I've not got a bad back. You've got a bad shoulder. Your back has been asked to do the work of your shoulder.
Yeah.
And so you don't actually have to think, oh, my shoulder's fine, there's no pain there. Well, just because you don't have any pain doesn't necessarily mean that you're okay, because you probably very rarely have any need to get your arm overhead, because we've evolved as humans. We're no longer swinging from trees, and you're no longer in the playground swinging from the monkey bars like when you were a kid. And so we get these other issues that go on elsewhere. But it's
there
easy
you go.
to blame.
You see, Andrew's actually saying this, and of course he's in the same sort of age range. Also suffering from aches and pains himself at the moment, sports related. See, just
we get repetitive injuries from sports? Do we have the prerequisite of movement ability to do that sport? And let's park an acute injury from a trauma. You've had a bad tackle in rugby or something like that. You've had a snap, a break, a tear. But we can again get those overuse patterns, but we can get poor movement coming or arising from muscular imbalances. Maybe we've developed the muscle, but we've ignored the connective tissue, the tendons. Yeah, very, very typical. I come from a sporting background, the same as Andrew, and I have a wide plethora of injuries, some permanent. I understand now, and at the time, it's like that meathead attitude of, got, you know, no pain, no gain. What absolute nonsense. It's almost embarrassing to say I was one of those guys as well. But unfortunately, when you're in your 20s, you don't think what you're going to be like when you're 40, 50, 60 and beyond. But the shocking thing is, and where I go with this is, so we're in our 40s and 50s now. If you've got an ache and a pain, or you can no longer do something as well, let's fast forward to our 60s and our 70s and our 80s. Most of us pay into a pension or have some sort of retirement plan, financial retirement plan, whatever that looks like. So you're saving for your financial future, but what about your physical future? And this is where I've worked in the care home industry. Falls happen for many reasons, but right at the top of that list is lack of mobility, where you're lacking the balance and the strength. And when we lose those things, we start to shorten our stride length when we walk. We look down because we're fearful of tripping up over something. So this old noggin, especially mine, yeah, is big and heavy. Look down, my center of gravity moves forward, so I'm increasing my risk of fall. We fall, we break a hip, we break a femur. It's almost the beginning of the end. And if you break a hip at the age of 65, the mortality risk or all-cause mortality is really high. Yes. Yeah. The survival rates are shockingly poor. But so much of this is preventable. And as a guy, excuse me, Beatrice, but as a guy, do you want to wear a pad because you can't get to the toilet quick enough because you don't have the strength and mobility and the balance to do that? Yes. Now, men tend to respond very poorly to sanitary products because women are more familiar with them from most of their lives. Yes. So wearing a pad is, men don't take to that very well. But equally, do you want somebody coming along to help you to get on and off the toilet and wipe your backside, or to get dressed because you can no longer bend down? So whilst I do a post, a demonstration of standing on one leg to put your shoes and socks on, it's only easy if you can do it. And I do get ridiculed by it. It's a circus act. No, because there's so much going on. We've got the balance and the control in the lower leg. The hips are having to actively fire to find that balance. You don't need a massive degree of flexibility, mobility, or strength or anything to do this simple life skill. But the more we work at this now, the more likely we will maintain our physical independence to enjoy our later life. So if we're living longer, the quality of our life isn't necessarily improving. I would rather die at 85 with having a poor quality of the last 2 years than living to 90, but living from 70 to 90 in pain or not being able to do very much. And we see people, when they lose the ability to move, their life becomes very small because they don't start going out as far. Instead of going to the supermarket, they go to the local shop because it's not as far. I can no longer drive, so I'm now limited maybe to a short distance walk or the bus. And then it's like we start relying on friends and family to support us for shopping, for washing, tidying that area or cleaning the bathroom because I can no longer manage. It's only going in one direction, but so much of this is important. And how many of us think about this actively? We tend to think of, I'm all right as I am, it's not going to happen to me, and I bury my head in the sand. Or I think, because I do sport, I'm fit and healthy. Sport doesn't mean to say you are capable. It's driven by metrics, and that's a performance metric. I know many sportsmen, elite, world-class sportsmen, both on the endurance and the strength front, who can't stand on one leg to put their shoe and sock on. Or do the back scratch test. They can't touch their feet.
Oh, not the back scratch test. Come on.
Yes.
No way.
No, can't do it either.
No.
No, women are better because you've got the clasp of your bra at the back, so you're constantly putting your hands behind your back on a daily basis. Men, we don't do that.
No, they don't. They bring it to the front.
We're not doing this.
They bring it to the front. They do it at the front, and then they whiz it back round again. Thank you, Toby. Now, listen. Just to clarify on this point, Andrew, sorry if you are actually outside of that age range. I mean, I apologise now. That was an assumption. I'm very, very sorry. How do you teach? There's a question Andrew's asking. How do you teach me to change?
First of all, you got to want to.
Willing. That's an important thing. There's something
absolutely.
I was actually talking about on my post on LinkedIn this morning. How many of us are actually willing to do something, right? Because the language that we use around anything in life, and I'm going to bring Beatrice into this as well because she's a copywriter. The language is so important. Yeah. You know, you're Beatrice, you're involved in branding and everything else. When in putting someone's brand out there, how important is that language? You know, is someone actually willing to do something? How often do people, when they approach you, actually, or when you look at people's branding, is it too much of their language negative in the first place? When actually they think that they're projecting one thing, but actually they're projecting the opposite of it.
I mean, I think it's the same thing as what Toby said. At the end of the day, they need to recognize that they need to change, and that can only come from them. It doesn't matter what anybody says, like, oh, you know, you should do that, or you can do that, or blah blah blah. It's going to come from that person themselves. And when they come, like when they put themselves forward, yes, the language is basically, it's a big part of their brand, and that's why putting together their tone guide, their voice guide, and how they present themselves, that's how they're perceived later on.
Yeah. So, Andrew, you've got to be willing, and then after that, Toby,
do something. I'm not saying necessarily come to me. I specialize with guys in their 40s and 50s because I relate. I'm in that age bracket. It doesn't have to be me. Just do something. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That's Henry Ford. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just not do it.
If you've got that arthritic hip, that dodgy knee, that bad back, you can still do something about it. It's not about winding back the clock and being perfect. It's taking a proactive approach. What about the rest of the part of your body? And I'm an optimist when it comes to body. Everything can be improved. Certainly above and below that point of pain or ache. It's what you're prepared to do. And it doesn't have to be particularly time consuming. We're talking, what I offer is a minimum 12 minutes a day. And that's the length of time it takes for your morning brew in the pot. So you can stack it.
It's true. Actually, I went to a physio recently. I've got some physio. I'm doing some physio on a regular basis every day, etc., for my left hip, which comes from, as you said, driving far too far. I used to do 80,000 miles a year.
Wow.
Andrew probably does a fair few miles because he's out and about there. But yeah, 80,000 miles a year, out and about in a car, driving round the country, visiting various people. It absolutely cream crackers your your body, you know. And even though I would take breaks, you know, the trouble is you're on a time, you're on, you know, you're being timed, if you like, because you've got to get to the next client. You've got to achieve what you've got to achieve. So even though, you know, I got to the point where I was like, well, every 2 hours I'm going to stop. I'm going to, you know, walk up a set of stairs or whatever just to help it. It's still a lot of driving. And to me, actually, it was when you got into a town or somewhere like that, and you're doing a lot of clutch control, that's when it can really get people. And the amount of people I used to see in assessments, driving assessments, who had similar problems because, you know, all day long they're using their pelvis is slightly twisted, they're using one leg up like slightly more, etc., you know, and it affects the hip.
Made worse, guys it's very common for guys to place their wallet back pocket, so your pelvis is tilted on one side for all of those 85,000 miles, exacerbating with what's going on as well. So it all adds up.
Yeah,
you guys
really
need to wear handbags. It's fine. Just wear handbags.
We need handbags, definitely.
Man bags.
Man bags. That's the future. Man bags, right there. Now, Beatrice,
yeah,
tell us a little bit about how you're working.
How I'm like,
yeah. What's your setup there?
I am sitting on a sofa because my apartment is so tiny. It does not have a proper desk. So think of like those old school movies where Americans watch TV on like a little TV dinner table. That's my desk.
That's your desk. So is your
That's
desk
my
quite
desk
low
because
down?
it came with this place.
So you're working on a little table there. Do you typically work with your laptop on your lap, or is it on the table in front of you, lower down, or?
I put it on the table. Actually, surprisingly, I feel a lot better in terms of, because, you know, normally when I'm sitting on a desk, I get like, you know, lower back issues, Toby. When I get older, like everything is going to be, I'm not even going to be able to move. I have so many injuries. And I mean, it's the same thing. And now I'm gotten to the point where I will spend that time in the gym to actively stretch because of my like hip flexors are so tight. And it seems to be that's a problem for many people because of that lack of squatting, etc., and the lack of movement. So taking the effort to squat, and you know, for some reason, since this couch is low enough, I'm facing direct, like the screen is at the right level, so there's no like bending down or up, but still, it's a weird location to have your desk.
Okay. So, Toby, you know, this is what we're faced with. I mean, a lot of people are making do, you know, they're working out of whatever they've got. What can someone like Beatrice do to make sure that she's firing on all cylinders, optimizing the way that she's working?
One, change positions. So if you're sitting on a low sofa, you mentioned you don't have a desk. Actually, the fact that you don't have a desk, I'd say, can work for you really, really well because you're not tied to that desk. So little table in front of you, you can sit forward on your low sofa, so you are actively supporting your body, because when we sit back, leaning on the chair, that pelvis is likely to roll forwards. We start to extend our lower back, and that we're in a very relaxed position. Okay, so there's no activation going on. So by sitting forward on that sofa to work, great. You could sit on the ground. You could have your laptop sit with your legs in a straddle position apart, have the laptop on a low stool, or even turn around so the laptop is on your sofa raised up. You can go into a squat, half kneeling, 90-90. There are so many different options, and it'll become uncomfortable maybe after 2 minutes. Great, that's going to force you to move. Change to the opposite side. That'll become uncomfortable after 90 seconds. Great, listen to your body, move, because it's going to encourage that regular movement into something different. And then get up, go and make yourself a drink, and you can move the body elsewhere in other ways as well. So some of the worst things we know, even for productivity, is to spend too much time focusing on the task at hand. And I've heard all sorts of things: work in 20-minute blocks, work in 90-minute blocks. Fine, just get up and go and do something different, albeit for 5 minutes. Take a walk around your apartment, go to the toilet, whatever it might be. It's a natural break. Use it. The key is just move.
Harris says, is standing desk better then in terms of not sitting, although I get similar back pain? Well, again, I've got a sit stand solution here. I can stand to work. I can sit to work. The likelihood is if you're getting, one of the things I would say is if you're used to sitting, then you'll find standing probably quite uncomfortable. If you're used to standing, you might, like my wife, you'll find sitting quite uncomfortable. However, the thing is that if you're used to doing one, you perhaps need to do a little bit of the other, right? Yeah, because if you're used to sitting all day long, but you never stand, there's half of your muscles there that aren't ever getting used, right? So you need to.
Yeah, but equally, we can look at retail workers who are constantly on their feet. They suffer with sore feet, sore legs, low back problems, shoulder aches and pains as well, because they're in that similar position. Yes?
And they need a chair to sit on occasionally and take the pressure off, yeah?
So
Right.
some suggestions for Harry is, if you've got a standing desk, is that an answer? It's a part of a solution rather than a solution. So whilst you're
Correct.
standing, I always remember the old Only Fools and Horses clip where, was it Del Boy standing at the bar when the bar
And then he falls.
He's leaning and just falls. Okay. So I'm going to stand up for this. So as guys, what we tend to do, if we're in a pub, we hinge off a hip and lean against something. It's this hinging off the meat of a bone. Ladies do this as well, where we just hang off this hip where one leg is loose and I'm weighting this side. So I push this, kinked it out to the side, yes? There's no muscle activation there. And if you're typing or standing, working like that, no. So we could, appreciate you can't see my feet. I can spread my feet for a broader base. Chair here, I can put one leg up on a chair or a stool in front and I can change legs. If you can adjust the height of the desk, again, you could do tall kneeling in front of your desk. So again, just mix up those positions.
Yeah.
It's just getting out of one or similar position. So nothing wrong with standing, nothing wrong with sitting. There's nothing wrong if you want to bend over, but it's rather those similar, frequent, excessive amounts of time spent in those positions. So move.
And bringing that back down into kind of products as well. You know, a lot of people forget that, you know, along with chairs and sit-stand desks, there are also sitting solutions that enable you, just because of the range of movement in them, that enable you to perch. Because effectively what you were talking about there in terms of like standing and then just, you know, centering on one hip, you know, if you can actually perch, i.e. between sitting, standing, you know, tip the front of the chair further forward so that actually your pelvis is more upright. And then you can just literally take the weight off the legs for a while, etc., but still actually engage the core a little bit more as well.
So many. Your limitation is your imagination rather than the tools that are available to you. And I would imagine, Beatrice, we're probably encroaching on your side, but the same with copy as well. Yes, it's how we write, how we speak. It's more about your imagination rather than lack of ability, or I don't have a word processor or chat GP.
Absolutely. Here we go.
Yeah.
Sit, stand, perch, and then take the dog for a walk. Yeah, absolutely, Philip. That's exactly what it's all about. Take the
regular
dog for a
movement.
walk. Regular movement. Take the dog for a walk. Do a bit of salsa dancing. You know, whatever takes your fancy, really. And I love the idea. Look, if you're faced with a small table, yeah, get down, get back with your knees bent and whatever again, because. You know, we said right at the beginning, or you said, Beatrice, people are more flexible because they adopt these positions. But you can adopt those positions and do some work. You know, it comes back down to that whole thing again of we assume that we've got to do the work and then we've got to do the exercise. Yeah, Toby, you said that as well in a way. We've got to do the work, then do the exercise. Actually, why are we not exercising while we're doing the work?
Social norms and expectations.
Yeah.
But I'm
There we
gonna
go.
say, I think stretching before working out, or any of that, I feel like stretching plays a huge part in adding mobility back in. We can go to the gym, we can go for a walk, but that's still not going to. Okay, yes, we can adjust like how we sit, but it doesn't necessarily reach all areas. And having had injuries, knee injuries, everything, like learning all those stretches from physio, etc., those have helped me to expand, like, in terms of mobility, and get closer to the, like, where people are here, although squatting.
I think flexibility is overplayed. It's part of a solution, part of a much bigger piece, a much bigger picture. If we think about a jigsaw with many, many pieces, but we overuse it, we overplay it, and we typically think, I have a tight lower back, I have tight hamstrings, so what am I going to do? I'm going to touch my toes. But why are those hamstrings tight? It's not because they're lacking length, they've been pulled tight. So if that muscle is already in a lengthened state and become fatigued, why would you stretch it? You do that because you get the immediate feedback of, oh, that feels good. If it feels good, it must be good for me, and I'm going to go and do it again. But all you've done is encourage a temporary plaster, a temporary fix or a plaster. It's an analgesic effect. It's not a solution, rather than looking for the underlying cause. So now, don't get me wrong, stretching has its place. Most certainly does, and there are different types of stretching, but we typically passive stretch rather than actively stretch. But if a muscle is tight, the question is, why is it tight to begin with? And it's more about the joint orientation. Yes. So if we think about tight hamstrings, if the pelvis tilts forward, it lengthens the hamstring at the back of the leg. It puts the spine into extension, so our lower back feels as though it's tight because it's working harder. We think, oh, I'll bend over. But actually what we want to do is reorientate the pelvis. The answer isn't usually stretching the front of the hips either. We need to rebalance the orientation of the hip so it's not as simple as it sounds, but we think we know what we're doing because I know how I feel, but it's purely that feeling is a perception. That's it. Doesn't mean to say it's the solution.
Fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating stuff. It's been an incredibly interesting conversation today. Thank you both for joining in this conversation. With regards to some of the ergonomic bits and pieces that are out there, accessories that are out there that help, good chairs with good adjustability, things like laptop stands and keyboards and mice, etc., that enable us to adopt different positions. I think one of the things that I would say about that is that the industry itself hates the fact that actually people just see these things as the solution in themselves, right? Because ultimately, and we've got Andrew on, who their company makes chairs. He would probably agree with me that one of the things that he probably dislikes more than anything is that someone buys one of their chairs which has got all of this dynamic adjustability in it, sits in it, adjusts it to a position, and then doesn't do anything different in it all day long. Part of the reason why a decent chair costs as much as it does is because the R&D and the manufacturing of the bit of the chair that enables it's not to do necessarily with the fabric or anything like that, but the actual mechanism itself has got a lot of movement built into it and can hold our body weight in different positions and allow us to adjust the way that we're sitting at any given time. But what people do is they go, right, yeah, that would be all right. That's comfortable. Okay, I'm going to work now. And they think that's it. Whereas actually, if that chair is designed to enable us to like stretch out over the chair or perhaps sit in a completely different way, or, I mean, they sell a chair where you can actually sit both back into the chair or flip round and sit forward into the chair with it up against your front up against the back. They want that creativity. They want that creativity, if you like, and I'm going to call it creativity, of how we sit. Beatrice, people need to be more creative in life, full stop, do they not?
I mean, that's the ideal, because, you know, as you get older, it's how do I explain it? It's you lose your creativity. It's like a muscle, same sort of thing. So even small little things like reading or, you know, doodling, as much as it's considered as, you know, you're not concentrating, actually it's you're flexing your creativity, and you're flexing that muscle. So going out for a walk and refreshing yourself.
And when you're trying to develop someone's badass brand out there as well, do you sometimes get people go, oh yeah, but I don't want to upset anybody, or I don't want it as a, you know, I don't want it to look too, oh, you know, oh, people are going to look at me if I have this or that, you know. And you say, well, yeah, but actually, don't you want it to show you and your uniqueness?
Exactly. You want people to look at you. You want to push those buttons. You want to push those boundaries. Okay, there's something to say for, like, you know, not being offensive to others. Yes, sure. Like, there's a boundary for everything. There's a line for everything, and it's obviously a very thin line. And how I post and how I present myself on LinkedIn very much is intended to try to push that line as much as possible, to show people that, hey, look, if you do put yourself out there and you put yourself, your values out there, that people will pay attention and you will generate conversations, rather than just, that's great, that's good to know. You know, it's like a one-word answer where there's no creativity, there's no brainstorming. And that's why even before, when I was working as a director of marketing, I would have my team go out to a cafe and then we would brainstorm, because that's where all the ideas are. People are relaxed. They're not sitting behind their desk going, oh, this is what I need to do. Like, it's you're in a different setting, and it's almost as if, like, hey, look, I can do this. What can I do with this?
Absolutely. You raise a great point there. Creativity comes from getting out there, you know. Yeah. And it's amazing how many creatives are out there right now, and all you've done is you've sat right there all day for the whole year. You know, you're not being creative because you're not seeing anything. Great functionality is brilliant, but only if the user understands. It's training. Too many companies supply products but never train the users how to get the best out of them. Absolutely true. Education is key to all of this, is it not, folks? Toby, people need better education. Beatrice, people need better education. That's how, you know, the world goes round. That's why we do this Wow Ergonomics every week. Where else would you find somebody like Toby and someone like Beatrice in the same room talking about ergonomics, getting moving, and badass branding? Almost forgot myself. All in one space. You wouldn't, would you? That's why this works, because actually every conversation is interlinked. Every conversation has something to put into place with something else. We are multifaceted human beings. Stop trying to think of us as kind of linear strands where actually we can only talk in our own stream. If we start to talk together in our different streams about what actually unifies us, that's where we find the solutions. That's what we'll be doing today. Get creative. Exactly. Beatrice, thank you. Toby, thank you. If you haven't connected with these wonderful people on LinkedIn, please do. We will be back same time next week with another Wow Ergonomics. Stephen will be back. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks to everybody that's commented today. please catch up with this if you haven't already on wowergonomics.com. We'll see you again next week. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.